depending on where you are when you are watching us. This is Babes with Books. This is Maya.
Hello.
Shauna.
Hello.
And I'm Leslie. And we are going to chat with you today about graphic novels.
I'm excited.
We've all read some graphic novels that we'd like to share, so it's super exciting. We're here at Pandora's Books, so thank you to them for letting us use their space to do our filming. And yeah, let's kick things off by talking about graphic novels in general. Do you guys like them? Do you hate them?
Well, it was kind of refreshing. I used to read Tintin and the Asterix and Obelix and stuff, and we had a whole set of them and when Sean was little, so I read those with him. And so it was kind of nice to jump back into that again. And I read Interview with the Vampire, Claudia's Story, and it was kind of interesting to see it visually instead of reading the words.
So you hadn't read one as an adult before?
I had not,
Okay.
other than Asterix and Obelix, which really doesn't count.
No.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
We should talk about that actually. What's the difference and whether they count or not?
Had you read them as an adult before?
Oh yeah,
this
I've
month?
read graphic novels lots.
Okay.
Yeah, I love graphic novels. I think they're great.
Yep.
What about you?
Yeah, I've read them. I don't go to them automatically, but I definitely read a few every year. It's a really wide world, and I don't necessarily know that people realize how wide it can
I have
be,
no idea.
and there's lots there. So I often definitely go to the more novel type ones, I guess, that have that second part in them, rather than like a comic book or a comic style one. Or so yeah, I've read them, and then I have a few people in my household that really enjoy them. So I would say they're favorites actually amongst everyone else in my family and my household. So
Cool.
yeah, we've been exposed to them a lot.
So you said there's a kind of a wide world out there with graphic novels. What does that mean?
To me, I think, well, we have a few examples on the table actually here. To me,
Let's
there's,
take a look.
so this here is called manga, and that comes from usually like Japan, right? Is kind of the basis of manga. This is the one area that I'm not super familiar with. So these are the funny ones that a lot of people get confused about because they read backwards.
Well, that one
Right?
is actually not.
Oh,
so
that's manga.
This is a manga.
This is manga style.
This is kind of manga style, but it's North American.
It's North American.
Which is front to back because that's the way we read.
Yeah.
But the Japanese style, they read back to front. So you do have to kind of learn how to read them if you're reading manga. And there is often at the very beginning of the manga, it will have like instructions. Because we read, our left to right, and you actually
So
read
you
right to
right to
left,
left. Okay.
and
Yeah, it's hard.
top to bottom, and it's
So there's manga.
it's a
And then like Paper Girls on the top there, which I started reading and I read some of for this Babes with Books, to me is like a comic book style. Quick stories, that kind of thing. So not necessarily, and I think that would go in the genre of all those superhero stories that we know. Whereas then we have, well, one of the most famous would be like Watchmen, which is more of like a full-on story, like a novel.
Yeah,
Like
well,
it's-
and a lot of times the big, thick
Yeah.
comic book styles too will be called omnibuses, and they're collections of, like, here's all the Spider-Man comics all
I
in
see.
one.
that's still like, yeah, comic style. Whereas this is like a graphic novel to
This
me.
is like a graphic novel, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so what is the difference between comic book and graphic novel, in your guys' opinion, other than the style?
If I turn those around so that...
Well, I picked up, of course, because we were talking about graphic novels this month, and I did pick up, just to take a look at it at chapters, was the Game of Thrones, the graphic novel version of it.
Okay, yeah.
So, so it was it was a lot bigger than a comic style, like the
Yeah.
Asterix and Obelix is comic in my mind. But I don't know.
I'm thinking a plot is where I'm going at for
Oh,
a difference
okay.
between a graphic novel and a comic.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like, do you know the difference between like a continuing drama on TV and a comic series?
Yeah.
So
Right,
so
yeah.
you watch, say, like New Girl. Every episode is just like your characters have something in common, but it's just one thing happens in that, and then you leave it
Right,
behind,
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
Whereas a graphic novel is like picking up a fictional novel where you start and you end with a plot. You have the same layout. You have you have your action sequences, and you have your climax, and you have your conclusion, sort of thing like that. Which is where I would go with.
Yeah, I would agree with
difference.
you. I think graphic novels, the definition would be a full story, a full plot, whereas a lot of the comic books, comic book style is just, they're a lot smaller. There is a complete story there, but they're, like you said, they're more serial. So, you know, you have Spider-Man in this situation, and the next comic book, all of a sudden he's in another situation.
I find
same
superhero
characters.
things so confusing as well. Like, I've tried to look them up in
There's
light
a
of the
huge-
Marvel movies and the, you know, onslaught of different superhero,
No
things
infinity
in-
spoilers here. Don't worry.
no superhero stuff in popular culture, and it's just crazy. Like, I just don't even understand how it's just like, oh, he died in this series, but then there's a whole new series. I actually think it's kind of neat to take this art and then just be able to interpret it in your own way, I guess, is kind of a neat way of looking at it. But.
Well, and ultimately too, I think that reading a graphic novel is a skill. I've talked to a lot of people that can't read a graphic novel, or it's just really not their thing. And you have to be able to read along, find the dialogue, and interpret the pictures. And you think, well, interpreting the pictures seems pretty easy, but it's not always. If you're used to having everything written out for you with description of what the characters are doing.
Yeah.
You have to have imagination for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you have to be able to look at those pictures and not just think that they're not there for anything, which is a mistake a lot of people make, is that the pictures aren't worth anything, I think. I tried graphic novels with a book club as well, and it didn't really go over well.
Yeah.
I was really
I
excited.
tried it with a
and I was
book
like,
club as well. And
yeah, no, this
most
is
people
not.
didn't.
So often on a page, I will show this because it has, so my kids like graphic novels, but this is an example. But there will often be up here, this is a picture, and it has no dialogue in it. It does have a word for like action. So in most graphic novels, you will have on this page, there are 4 without any words in them.
This one has 5.
So you have to figure out the pictures, and that's moving the story along as well. Yeah, you have had a lot in there.
And then you get stuff like this, like in The Watchmen, where there's full things of text in between the story. And it's interesting because you have some pages that will have very specific, here's my boxes, but then you have the one picture there that is supposed to draw your attention. There's something important about this because it takes up more of the page. Right?
Yeah.
So knowing some of that stuff and interpreting it is kind of really interesting.
Yeah, I really recommend, if you haven't explored the world, try and pick something up. To pick my books this month, I went through quite a bit, and I thought I would put a list out on connected to our link,
awesome.
kind of different ones that might appeal. There's going to be something there kind of to appeal to everybody. So, yeah, it was hard for me to decide.
The list will be in the link down below, and
You can
can
try
also
to put it on our blog.
Yeah, we have a blog, thebabeswithbooks.wordpress.com. You can check it out there.
Yeah.
So what did you guys read? I know, Shauna, you just mentioned that you read Interview with a Vampire, which I think I would consider a graphic novel.
Yeah.
So tell us about it.
Well, it's the story told from Claudia's mind, which is interesting. And what was kind of cool about this one is that it's mostly black and white, with the splashes of the blood in it, which was really kind of
Vampire-y, hey?
It was kind of ghoulish,
Yeah.
which was awesome.
Oh yeah, there's a good page to show.
Or fire. There's fire there. So anytime there was red sort of stuff, that's really popped out, and like the artist's work is really incredible, actually, because there's so much of the people in it, right? It's all about the characters, and this story has always been about the characters. So it was really quite interesting, and the visuals was incredible. So I thought it was really fun.
Had you read Interview with a
I
Vampire?
had when I was in
Okay.
my 20s, so it was quite a
So
while
did this
ago.
fill stuff in though for you? Did it give you a different perspective? Is that what it was intending to do, or?
Yeah,
Or
I
did you kind of view it as a completely different?
it's quite, I don't know, I thought it was quite a bit different, but at the same time it was the same story. So I don't know, it was just fun. It was different because it was a graphic novel plus a different side of the story. It was just kind of totally different. It was fun, and it was quick to read, and I don't know, it was good. It was a good time. It was a good distraction from things.
Okay.
It was fun.
Cool. What did you read?
What did I read? I ended up choosing. This is called Red Rising: Sons of Ares. So this is a prequel to the author's name is Pierce Brown, and he wrote a trilogy, and then he's writing a second trilogy, and the first book is out. It's a sci-fi saga based in space. Very, very popular. It's been optioned for films. He's been quite big in the last 4 or 5 years. And I've enjoyed all 4 books so far. Kind of devoured the newest one just a couple of months ago. So this actually, he partnered with some artists. Pierce Brown partnered with some artists and has published a prequel to how this revolution started. This is about kind of a revolution of people, his other books. So this is about a character who is featured, but hasn't had his story told, and they told it through the graphic novels. So this actually, like Leslie was saying, you could go to a comic book store. Yes, those exist. There's like 10 of them in Calgary. And if you were onto it, they publish these in small comics that you think of, which a lot of people don't necessarily see anymore. But then what they do is compile it. So this is like issues 1 to 6, all compiled. And you go through and you read, and then it comes to issue 2. Very dark art, very not very precise art, I found. Not a lot of features are drawn. It's I guess not necessarily a happy story, so maybe that's where it was going there. I found the art was interesting. So then like I was saying, like this is issue 2 now as I'm reading along, and then it goes into issue 2. I find the art is really important in these releases. Usually they'll have alternate covers, and they'll have, at the end, they had a few pages of how they figured out to draw the characters and kind of the procession along that. The artists are kind of the ones who shine in this. It was really good. I really liked Red Rising. If you're at all interested in Pierce Brown's series, this is definitely, I would put this as a must read because it really tells the tale of an original character. Also, this is something that you can read first. So if you haven't heard of Pierce Brown and what I've said, sci-fi saga, it has a male protagonist. It's totally like space opera. If that intrigues you, you can start with this. See if it floats your boat, get it under your belt. So you don't have to read his novels first. So yeah, really enjoyed it. It was a bit dark for me, the art, and a little bit bloody and gory kind of thing, which is funny because I think that's like the swear word they use is bloody damn or something like that. So I also started another series. I started this series as well. It's called Paper Girls. There were 3 published so far, and the 4th was just released. The 4th kind of grouping of them. Really interesting looking series. I made it through the first one. It's set in 1988, and it is about 4 girls who deliver papers, and then something happens. Again, space travel.
That for a teaser, then something happens.
Yeah, I realized I had to give you a bit more. Space travel, some bad guys and good guys coming from space and from time, but combined in there is this like 1980s kind of feel. A lot of feminist power too. Like these girls are like the first girls to deliver newspapers.
Kind of goes along with your the one you recommended last month.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it was called because I keep wanting to think vagina monologues, but it's not. It's
no refrigerator
monologues.
Yeah, definitely, but it's kind of fun. Teenage girls, they're like 13, so but it's an adult book, I believe. Oh no, it says juvenile, so
teen maybe.
Yeah, I would definitely go teen but an adult could enjoy this for sure. So that was another series that I went through, but Red Rising was my main one for this month. How about you?
Well, I actually read, so interestingly enough, my book is called Liddy, and it is not at all sci-fi, fantasy, or anything, because I think a lot of people think, oh, well, I don't read that kind of stuff because I'm not really into sci-fi and fantasy, but there is a whole group of books that are graphic novels that are general fiction, or they really focus on social issues, that type of thing. So my book is set in the 1930s, and it is about mother who has given birth to a stillborn, and about a week after the child is passed on, the mother sees the child and believes that it has been given back to her from heaven. And so she picks it up, carries it around, shows it to people, and of course everybody else around her in the community is kind of feeling like, what do we do about this? Because they don't see a baby. It's narrated by the statue of the Madonna that sits kind of on the
Oh, really?
yeah, sits
Interesting.
on the one of the buildings that kind of overlooks this entire community, which is kind of neat in itself too, because you have that parallel between another, you know, character who has had a child that has been raised from the dead, so to speak, and you have to believe it because that's what you see
I'm really intrigued by
with you
yours.
see with your eyes.
Super
interesting.
The cool thing about it is that it really talks about how a community, so eventually the community is like, you know what, if that's what she needs, then that's what we're going to go with. And the entire community that she lives in lets her believe that this Liddy goes to school. But then there's some question, is Liddy actually there? Because the kids are all drawing pictures of her and they all look exactly the same. So can they see her? Or is this
It's not
just
science
something
fiction?
they've talked about?
Wow.
But yeah, just really a lot of emotion in this, and
Seems like a really interesting comment on like life and death
and it's
how we
right,
deal with it.
you know,
and-
Liddy goes to college, moves away,
Really?
and yeah. So, and then the mother's kind of left alone as an empty nester, and yeah, it's really interesting. And set in that timeline too. So the graphics in it are very, they're kind of drawn in sepia kind of style.
Cool.
And
to read that.
commentary on that time frame as well. So I really liked it. Definitely
Yeah.
recommend it.
Cool.
Do you find that the graphic novels sometimes, going off your book, and I've had this experience, even with, you know, Paper Girls and this one, do you think that they can do a better job at highlighting some of those big issues than maybe a fiction novel can? Or do you think that they can tackle them with combining the art and
It
story?
definitely, I do. I think that it definitely gives two modes of commentary that you can follow. We all know some people learn or absorb via visual, and some people learn and absorb via reading and figuring it out. So to have those two things interacting together can definitely make a story more poignant and some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I also think that the pictures do a lot of the work that an author would do in a novel. So they do not have to take the time to maybe form a setting, the author of the words, or form a description. You get to see the character, you get to see where they're set, you get to see what they're wearing, you get to see what they're carrying, where they live. And so therefore the story, that storyline told through their voices can just be more focused on those issues that they're bringing up.
Yeah, that's true.
Is kind of, I find the words in a graphic novel to be very strong usually. They're not wasted.
No.
They're very sparse, and they tell you kind of what you need to know. I think they would be very difficult to write successfully
yeah.
to
Can't even
become
imagine.
something like
Kudos to all you
Yeah.
graphic novel writers out
Exactly.
there.
yeah, I think, and I think it would be very interesting and hard to find if you were an artist and author to kind of marry those two visions, right? You'd have to find someone that you worked really well with. That I mean, either the artist, his vision is portrayed, or the author is like.
And
how do
oh
you
my
marry
goodness,
those two
people
things?
that do both.
Yeah, that's
You're
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
I think too. What do you guys feel about the stigma that graphic novels have? And because there's a stigma out there that it's not real
It's
reading.
not a real book. Yeah.
Just like audiobooks aren't really reading.
We've had that discussion at school.
Well,
a lot.
yeah.
Also, like, even for my husband, he reads a lot of graphic novels, and so, but we also track our reading on Goodreads. We've talked about Goodreads before, and he's like, "Well, do I get to write it down?" I'm like, "Yes, it's a book. You
Yeah.
read a book. Like, it doesn't matter if you. They don't usually take long, so that's kind of
Yeah.
where you can also feel a little bit like, well, I didn't really read today. Even if you've read what would be called a book in many forms, it took you 2 hours. So
Well, and I think you still have to follow the story
Still have to
from start to
interpret, yeah.
end. You have to interpret. There's different skills you're using for sure. It doesn't take you as long because there's not as many words, so your eyes don't have to track quite the same as reading. But I think there's still a huge stigma out there for, well, I can't let my son read a graphic novel instead of a novel for school because, well, that's
yeah,
not,
I've seen that
not
happen a lot. Yeah.
It's not the
Sure.
same, right?
And actually, there's a lot of studies done that show that kids or even adults who are having trouble reading, that graphic novels are a really good starter, a really good push, because they I mean, I guess because your brain usually does see visual more. So if they can have that visual to go along, you know, we worry about our kids watching too much TV or things like that. We'll give them a graphic novel, and essentially they are. I brought a lot of my kids. This is the Flying Beaver Brothers, so this is for young kids, but they go through that. We have, like, there's so many. Secret Coders, Amulet's a very famous one. Bone is
like Bone.
one of the most famous.
That's awesome, yeah.
Even this is our newest one, which is really fun. You can find something for everybody. Catstronauts. So we have cats in space. Again, sorry, it's not all pink and purple. It's totally readable for anybody kind of thing, right? It's not like, oh, sweet kitties wearing bows.
It's gender
it's
neutral.
a really fun one that anybody could pick up and really enjoy the story. So lots of, and I mean, for adults, that one down there is written by Margaret Atwood. So probably one of the most prolific Canadian authors, most award-winning.
Angel Cat.
Yeah, that came out in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling a stigma, you're still reading Margaret Atwood. You can tell people you've read Margaret Atwood.
I read, my last book was Margaret Atwood.
Yeah, so there's lots of choice out there. I think it's kind of silly in this day and age. I think it's an amazing form. I think it's similar to me for short stories. I think a good short story is incredibly hard to write. I think a lot of people
is, harder to write than
I think a lot of people could write like a 400-page novel. You can sit down and you can write it because you got a lot of words that you get to use, and it can just kind of come out. Yeah. But to take it down to 20, 30 pages and tell that story, and that's what they've also done.
A lot of times, especially in a lot of the anthologies that get published that you see them in, you have a limit of no more than 5,000 words or 6,000 words. So you have to.
How do you develop characters and scenery?
Every sentence that you put in there has to mean something.
Yeah, to tell a short story and to have a reader feel satisfied at the end, and it's similar to this. To have a book be mostly pictures and have a reader feel satisfied that they've read a full story and that they feel like they've got their beginning and their middle and their conclusion, I think is a really neat skill. I think it's amazing. Yeah.
So in conclusion, are we saying read more graphic novels?
I definitely am saying read more graphic novels. As Shauna said about her book, it was a bit of a break. They are. You read a book in a couple of hours. It's good for, waking up and reading, go to bed. It's quick, it's easy.
And hey, if you have those Goodreads goals, you can knock one off.
Yeah. And like Leslie said, there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
Like I was saying about that list that I have, there's definitely some really literary ones out there. There's some female, there's some male, there's some action, there's some drama, there's some funny.
If you haven't found one you like, you haven't been looking hard.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. There's lots out there.
Exactly, there's tons.
What are we doing next month?
We are doing YA, speaking of kids and reading. That's something that I do a lot at the school, is helping young readers find something exciting to read, and so I've read quite a few. It goes much further than the Hunger Games. So there's a lot more books out there for YA, and I really like it as a genre, and it'll be really fun, and we'll make some good recommendations for you.
It's another genre I'm kind of passionate about.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is one that I'm not, apparently.
I know, right?
YA is big. Just like graphic novels, I'm going to preach to you about how big that genre is next month.
We're going to have to, we might have to do a couple of these as a series just because it's such a huge...
Yeah, lots of YA graphic novels.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next month.
Yeah.